Hey there and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. Come along with our triumvirate of terror as we descend into darkness, hurtle into horror, and plunge into peril. If you've ever had a tongue wrap around your head, you're in the right place. I'm Justin.
Wow. Okay. All right. We're just going to we're going to beg the question, huh? Okay. I'm not even going to address it. It's not worth it. I'm Nico, and my favorite track off of Ice Nine Kills, The Silver Scream, is American Nightmare.
Well, I'm Dan C.
Incredible.
And we're here today to review Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So this one was directed by Wes Craven, starring Heather Langenkamp as Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund as Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger, Miko Hughes as Dylan Langenkamp, Wes Craven as Wes Craven, and John Saxon as John Saxon. If that sounds confusing, dear listener, just know that this is a meta kind of movie and more will be explained through the synopsis.
It's honestly pretty easy to follow.
And that's coming from Nico. We open on the set of an upcoming Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Some special effects or prosthetic guys are working on a new version of Freddy's iconic knife glove when it begins moving on its own and attacks members of the set. Just then, we are shown that it was all a dream, and the story begins in earnest. We see Heather, who plays Nancy in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. She and her family had been subjected to a stalker, and she receives another call where the stalker quotes the infamous Freddy nursery rhyme from the series. You know, the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Oh.
Well, not yet, but soon. Nico, what happens next?
So, Heather's husband is a special effects guy in the film industry, so he heads off to work while Heather goes to an interview, leaving their son Dylan with a babysitter. At the interview, Heather gets questioned about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and gets surprised when Robert Englund, who plays Freddy, shows up in character. Heather's been having some bad dreams about the whole Nightmare franchise, and this really doesn't help. After the interview, Heather gets a call from New Line Cinema, and it is revealed that Wes Craven, the director, is working on a new script and he wants her back as the lead.
Well, if I was going to make a movie, Dan would definitely be the lead. So Dan, what's happening next?
Well, Heather is leaning towards not reprising her role, and she goes back home. When she arrives, Dylan goes into an episode or fit regarding Freddy Krueger. Heather freaks out and calls her husband to come home. But on his drive home, her husband begins to fall asleep at the wheel and Freddy attacks him, causing his car to crash, which kills him. Heather finds out later that night and is deeply disturbed. After her husband's funeral, Heather meets with John Saxon, who's the guy who plays her father in the Nightmare movies, and he tells her that maybe she should go get Dylan checked out. Dylan gets worse, having episodes and constantly referencing Freddy, and Heather begins to realize she has to do something soon.
Very true. She calls Robert, but he's unwilling to discuss anything, although he's also been having bad dreams about the whole Nightmare series and Freddy. Heather decides to go straight to the source and meets up with Wes Craven. He hits her with a real lore dump and tells her that there's an evil entity that feasts on innocence and is currently taking the form of Freddy Krueger. One of its only weaknesses is that it can be trapped by a story. Once the story dies, though, whether by being watered down or some other means, the entity is free to kill again, and that's what's happening right now. So essentially, Heather needs to take on the role of Nancy once more and defeat the entity one more time in order to put things right. Nico, how would you follow that?
So Dylan is getting worse, resulting in Heather taking him to the hospital. They aren't very successful in treating him there, unfortunately, and they actually start to question Heather because she shows up with wounds from a Freddy attack. And the hospital staff suggests that they may need to take Dylan away from her temporarily. Well, Freddy then shows up and kills Dylan's babysitter in the hospital room, and Dylan sleepwalks out of the hospital, across a freeway, and back home. Heather chases after him, and when she gets there, she runs into John. Only this time, he's acting like her father from the movies, even calling her Nancy. Heather realizes the movie and reality are blending together, and she accepts the role of Nancy, which causes Freddy to appear and kidnap Dylan.
Indeed. Well, Dan, you got to put this to a cease. You got to solve this. How's it end?
So Heather takes a bunch of sleeping pills that Dylan left for her and enters a dream. That's wild having your child leave drugs for you.
Yeah, right.
It's okay. She finds Dylan in Freddy's
On a scale
lair.
from Before I Wake to Fear Street, where does this lie?
Fear Street.
True.
Oof.
She finds Dylan in Freddy's lair, and together they manage to fight him off. Heather is a total dime piece.
She
absolutely.
is so
And she and
beautiful.
Dylan emerge from the dream in their house. Heather finds a copy of the finished movie script and a note from Wes Craven thanking her for taking on the role of Nancy one last time. The movie ends with Heather reading to Dylan from the why do I want to say
Nope,
unfinished?
it's not unfinished.
But it is unwritten.
The movie ends with Heather reading to Dylan from the finished script.
Feel the rain on your skin, Dan. No one else can feel it for you.
Oh, I will feel
Only
it.
you can let it
I
in.
will let it in. The end.
I say we go ahead and get down to business. Dan, how does this movie look?
So I'm not the biggest fan of how this movie looks.
Oh
I
no.
think it looks like fine, but I don't really like how Freddy looks. I kind of feel like his face looks like a mask,
Mm.
and he doesn't look like the burned, creepy guy that he used to. To me, he looks kind of like a dude wearing a mask. So he doesn't really look like the old, burned, kind of creepy guy that he used to me. He looks
Right.
like a guy with sort of a fucked up face. And yeah, he looks a little creepy and a little scary, but it just looks like a costume to me.
I see. Anything else aside from that?
No?
All right. Nico, what's your take?
So personally, I like the way Freddy looked, although I totally understand where you're coming from. It's definitely less grotesque and a little bit more stylized, which I think fits with the time period since this is in the 90s as opposed to the 80s. But all in all, I like the cinematography. In particular, I really like the way that they shot the scene where Dylan's babysitter just gets absolutely eviscerated and strung up in the middle of the hospital. It was just really interesting to think about how they might have done that in particular. And I always kind of think about it as almost like a little, mental exercise whenever there's something like that, just being like, how did they do that? So that's just an interesting part of watching movies, that this one happened to tickle that little itch, I guess.
Indeed. Indeed. From my perspective, I think the film in general looks a lot more grounded than the earlier Nightmare releases. I think, aside from the very end when they confront Freddy in his lair, it's very ordinary a lot of the time. And I do think that does match the story concept of, again, the entity attempting to break in, but it's interesting to look at that. Now, sound-wise, I liked it personally. I thought the score made sense. But let me talk real quick about the ending song, like as the credits play. I didn't know if they were about to bust out the Nightmare rap. I didn't know what was going on.
So it's very hip-hop beat.
Dude, yeah. And then this
Yeah,
bass line is just slapping. And I'm like, what's going on here? So Dan, talk to me about the sound.
We're Pumpkin Hill.
Overall, I thought the sound was okay. One part that I definitely laughed way too hard at, though, at the end when they defeat Freddy and the whole place is collapsing and they're like trying to get out, there's a part where the closed captioning says Freddy screams, but it really just sounds like he burped. He was just like, and like it was supposed to be his like no or something, I don't know, as he was dying, but it was like, I was like, wow. But aside from that, the audio was fine.
Got you. Nico, wrap us up on audio here.
So for me, the only thing that really took me out of it with audio was some of the Foley when things were crashing and breaking. Like they used a few stock sounds that you hear across a bunch of different movies. And I don't know if I can knock the movie for that because it was from 94, but it was definitely one of those moments where it took me out of it. So I guess that's a detractor. But for the most part, I like how it sounded. And I was a big fan of seeing one of the original motifs come back into play once Nancy sort of like steps into the movie for real.
Indeed. For sure. Now, this movie is an incredibly meta story on like several levels. This is an incredibly meta story. Now, I do want to say one thing. I personally like it, but as a question to the room, how did you feel about the general meta-ness of the story?
I am the one of the biggest fans of metatextual narratives, and I really love seeing the layers sort of peel back one by one. One of my favorite scenes, I don't know if it is my favorite scene, but it's one of them, is when I almost called her Nancy. Heather is talking with Wes Craven, and she is speaking about the nightmares that he's having that have turned into the script for a movie that he's writing that is actually this movie. But there's so much going on, but none of it seems forced. It all felt like a natural progression for me of the stakes. And that's the key thing whenever you have a metatextual narrative like this. It cannot feel forced. If it does, that is just the downfall of the entire film's dignity, really. But I think this passes.
And it's funny because actually you mentioned when she goes to see Wes. So there's a part where they show the computer and the script, and like the script shows what's happening like right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminded me of Mouth of Madness.
Big
when
time.
He had the book from Sutter Kane and then he read what was going on. So for sure that. Dan, what'd you think about it?
So I like the concept of it, but I don't like the execution. I actually disagree with what Nico said about it, like not hitting the line or whatever. I think it went way over that line.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like, when you listen to Logic rap, you're like,
Oh no.
hey man, sometimes
God
you're pretty
damn.
good, but you're just too Logic. Can you just like turn the logic down a little bit? That's kind of how I feel about this movie. Like they just were like, oh, Nightmare on Elm Street. We're going to do all the Nightmare on Elm Street. And like, I got so tired of hearing the song because immediately, like pretty much near the beginning of the movie, you start to hear the Freddy song.
Mm-hmm.
And they sing it, I don't know, 15, 20 times throughout the movie. And I'm like,
At least.
I get it. Like, I understand. We don't have to do this every time. And it just felt to me like an excuse to get the OG cast back together. And the only way to do that was to have a movie of the movie. Like, for it to be meta was the only way for that to happen. And I feel like it was too forced. I don't mind the fact that it was meta. I just don't like the way that they did it.
Now, that's interesting. As a question, Wes Craven did this, and then 2 years later, Scream would come out, another meta movie, so to speak, although probably a little bit less meta than this. How'd you
I
feel
would say
about that?
more, because that's in conversation with the genre itself. This is just in conversation with the series.
Well, I suppose that's one way to look at it. I looked at it the same way, but from the opposite side. Because this was so specific about one film series, I thought there was many more references. But duality of man and all that. Dan, did Scream make you feel the same way, or was this was this different to it?
No, I don't think it made me feel the same way because it was a commentary on the genre. So it was pulling from a few different things
Mm-hmm.
and nothing was so specific. But this movie just, to me, hammered home the first movie specifically over and over and over. And then a couple times some of the other movies, like when her hair turns gray. I remember in our review, like you didn't like her hair being gray in the third movie. And in this one's like, why did that even have to happen in this? Aside from it just being a callback to a previous movie, which this entire movie is callbacks to other movies. So I just think there was like too much of that sprinkled in, whereas Scream was
More original.
I wouldn't say original, but spread out across multiple movies or the whole genre.
That makes sense. And I will say it's kind of funny because I feel like there's not really that much from, I believe there were 2 other Nightmare movies that came before this one.
Yeah, we've seen 1 through 3. This is the 6th chronologically, so we skipped over 4 and 5.
And it's funny because I feel like this movie didn't give a shit about 4 and 5.
Just like Dan's upstairs neighbors doesn't give a shit that he's recording a podcast.
Nope.
Now, I will say this, and this adds to the meta thing a little bit as well. In the movie, Heather has a stalker, and he sends her threatening calls and stuff like that. So Heather, in real life, was on a TV show. I forget what the show was called.
Slime Time Live.
No. And basically, there was a fan who wasn't happy with the way the show ended, so she had a stalker in real life. And then they ended up writing that in. Like, it got so bad at one point in time, apparently she, like, went to England or something.
Jesus,
And-
man.
Not
No,
England.
no.
England.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's crazy that that was written in. And in fact, Wes Craven wanted to ratchet it up a little bit, not the stalking part, but he actually wanted to see if her husband in real life would be willing to be her husband in the movie. And he was like, nah, because that's getting a bit too close, bruh.
When did Perfect Blue come out?
Yeah, for real.
Shit, man. That's... I wonder what it was like to work on this as, someone who just was going through all of that to have it mirrored in the film. I wonder if that was cathartic or just maybe even more triggering. I mean, I hope not, but like, man, what a fucking whirlwind of events in your life, huh?
You just got stalked, right? Yeah? Cool. We're going to put that one in the movie right there, champ. Moving on. I mean,
Eesh.
I will say as well, too, that I don't think it would have been possible without the friendship and camaraderie built up over the years.
Oh, for sure.
Between her, Wes Craven, Robert Englund, those kinds of folks. So I've heard they're all on great terms. So,
Yeah.
Dan, I got a question for you. You've already said you're not a big fan of the mask. You're not a big fan of the look. What'd you think of the changes in general to Freddy?
What did you like, Dan?
Well, no, but what'd you think of the changes in general to Freddy, including the whole entity aspect?
I didn't really like it that much.
Oh my God, change your name to fucking Justin. Jesus Christ.
I don't know if you can tell a pattern here, but I don't know. I just feel like this movie just, in a weird way, it was too much the same. And then what they did change, they changed too much to me. And Freddy just lost, to me, what makes him Freddy. He just kind of became some random thing that is here and has always been here for time eternity and will be for the rest of time as well. And
It felt a little Pennywise-y, I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, and it was just like, I don't understand the point. Why couldn't you just keep him Freddy, like normal Freddy? I don't really know what the purpose of that whole thing was.
I know that the idea changed a little bit as they were writing and working on it. But for me, and you're going to sense a pattern here, I generally liked it. I thought it was really cool as this movie's already so meta and it just has so much in terms of like literary just commentary and things like that, that the weakness of this monster was to be trapped in a story. And only when a story gets weakened or watered down or something like that, then the entity can escape. Because that also provides credence to so many like oral traditions and superstitions contained within communities. So I think that's really cool personally. And then the fact that, again, you got to put on the cape one last time, like you have to be Nancy. I think that's cool because it almost is sometimes, well, I'm going to actually save that for the end because it's not quite talking about Freddy the entity, but I like that. And then also, I feel like they had to make him different from Freddy because otherwise he would be Freddy. And that wouldn't work IMO in the story. Like I felt like the entity and Freddy had to be different things. Like this is not Fred Krueger. This is something taking his form. But Nico, surprisingly, on my side for some of this, what'd you think?
Right. So I feel like it's okay that he is this sort of entity thing now.
That's right, Dan. Fuck you.
What I'm really curious about
Go off,
is,
King.
I'm wondering if, and cards on the table, again, we haven't seen 4 and 5. I'm wondering if this was sort of itself a commentary on perhaps Wes Craven not liking the 4th and 5th films.
That's what I was going to say. That felt like a shot when he was like, when the story gets watered down or something. I was like, hey.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if this wasn't his own little opportunity to be like, oh yes, the return of the master. Let me use my signature flourish technique. And then there's like a smash cut ends, like explosions. I don't know. Like, I think it is a little contrived, I'm not going to lie, but in terms of it being a sort of omnipresent threat, that is something that is a pretty common trope in fantasy, horror, and science fiction. So I was willing to let it slide personally.
All right, well, let's slide into this. To the two of you, does this live up to the Nightmare legacy? Does this stack up to the 3 films we've seen preceding this?
Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, yo, Dan,
No.
choose your words fucking carefully. Oh, my God.
No, it doesn't. I don't know. The
Two,
like you
my
do.
guy. Two.
Well, okay. See, here's the thing. I don't like 2 at all. 2 is
I don't think any of us like to.
But one thing about this movie, this new one, New Nightmare, there wasn't, to me, a lot of, it didn't grip me a lot, and it didn't have any like iconic scenes. And I know that not every movie can be iconic, of course, but in 1 and 2 and 3, there are each scenes that I'm like, damn, like that was really cool, or like, wow, that was really cool effects, or really cool this or that. And this movie didn't have anything like that for me. It came close once or twice,
Oof.
but it didn't quite do it. And I just feel like, to me, when you have the antagonist be in dreams and all this kind of stuff, and Freddy, you can do so many cool things with Freddy, and this movie just didn't do any of that. And I think it was kind of a disappointment to me.
Mm-hmm. Nico, sometimes the grip is too hard, but did this movie grip you just right?
It gripped me just right, Justin. I had a
Don't
feeling you would
that.
understand.
Nope, don't tell me that.
Nah, man. I will say the movie is definitely a lot less fantastical than the first 3. You're right, Dan. There's no, like, think back to 3, which we just reviewed, when dude just pops out of the wall like a big fucking sandworm, but there's Freddy's face at the end, and he's just like, "What's up, bitch? You're in my nightmare." There's like, he doesn't even really have that much dialogue either. So I definitely understand why you're not feeling the sort of normal charismatic zing that is accompanied with his presence on screen.
I mean, it's not just that, like the craziness, but in the first one, you have the scenes where she's like in the body bag, like being drugged down the hall, and that's not like fantastical, but you're like,
Right.
"Holy shit, that's a powerful scene." Or she's in the bathtub and the claw comes up out of the water.
That's the one that sticks in my mind.
Yeah, and they do that in this movie twice.
But they also stabbed Freddy in the dick in this one. So.
And I was gonna say that took me out of it when that happened, because that it was.
Doesn't her husband also get stabbed in the dick, or am I wrong?
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah, close. Anyways, he gets his dick scratched. That's what.
Yeah, he like scratches him.
Yeah.
Oof.
And it's just like, I don't know, man. Like, you don't have, or the scene in 1, I think, where he's like kind of pressing at the wall and everything like that.
In the bedroom.
Yeah, that's been dictated, not dictated,
Emulated?
emulated. Thank you. That's been emulated in a ton of different things, and the blood fountain, and like all these things are iconic in horror and everything. And I didn't see a single scene. The one that you mentioned earlier, when Julie's kind of getting like messed up around the wall and everything on the ceiling, that was close, but it didn't quite, like, I think in that scene he's like, "You ever seen somebody skin a cat or something?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit, this is about to get crazy." And then
He didn't?
it doesn't. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Mm-hmm. So Dan's thoroughly shit on this one. Nico, does this live up to the legacy of the other movies?
Again, two is some dog shit, but I think it does. I think it does. It's a really hard thing to do, just because this is such an iconic franchise, and I think that, again, by sort of acknowledging its own position within the genre as a sort of paramount entity, I think that it does a good enough job through how it incorporates meta narratives. But again, that's not, for everyone.
Indeed. Dear listener, if you want to know what I think about something, just take what Dan said and like multiply it by -1. For those of you who aren't good at math, it's the opposite. But point being is, I think it did, because now don't get me wrong, the first movie I feel like stands alone. I don't think anything's touching that first movie.
Yeah.
Like there's so many iconic scenes, the story itself, like that's damn near perfect. But basically now, this is almost kind of like recontextualizing everything and looking at things through a different lens. And I personally fucking love it. And I'll give more reasons when I give my final score. But I do definitely think that this stacks up. Now, we've looked at the past, but let's look at the future here. how would you see the series continuing after this? Now, dear listener, obviously we know it does, but we're just using our knowledge that we have for right now. So imagine it's 1994. Where would you go from here?
I would maybe explore, and I guess this would take the franchise away from Freddy, or at least very differently, but I would explore the entity more and see how else that entity could manifest and what else it could be.
I would say, honestly, you can't follow this, and I would ignore this movie and just continue on making regular ass Freddy movies, because they are maybe quote unquote watered down, but that is Nightmare on Elm Street. Then you can have bad movies, you can have good movies, but you know, I don't fucking like Dream Warriors. Nico?
I would do a hard pivot and go into a different genre entirely. I would do a Nightmare on Elm Street isekais, bro.
You were doing so well up till this. Now, I'm going to ask, does anyone have a favorite kill or favorite scene in this?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
My favorite kill is when Freddy gets stabbed in the dick.
What a thing to do, eh?
Yeah. Stabbed to the dick and then burnt alive.
Yeah. I guess, real quick, I didn't think about this until now, but I guess that's a divine retribution, right? I mean, he kind of like has a thing for kids, so he gets stabbed in the dick, and then there was a big fire in his
Fair
past,
play.
so he dies in a fire. So I guess that's sort of poetic justice.
It's also Hansel and Gretel. So,
Well, not so much the dick stab,
witch
but
gets
definitely
stabbed
burning
in
in
the
the
dick.
oven.
yeah, the witch gets stabbed in the dick. But I mean, like, this whole fucking story is
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel, which they foreshadow at like the halfway point. And as soon as they did, it's like, oh, okay, so that's what's going to happen. Because, you know,
True.
I'm an educated watcher of media.
Yeah, she even talks about breadcrumbs with the pills.
Yeah.
How the fuck
Now-
did he even get the pills, bro?
Don't worry
You didn't
about it.
see?
He's got a guy, all right?
The doctors give him one pill,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden he magically has a whole bunch of pills.
You got to watch the director's cut. He like steals like a whole bottle of bread.
Ah.
Trust me.
Yo, why did she not
Good
just
for
go
him.
get Rex?
Yo,
Why the fuck did she not just go back home immediately?
bro, let me tell you, she was like, what can I do for you? Anything, I'll do anything. He was like, I want Rex. And she's like, fuck you, you don't get Rex. You asshole." And then later she was like, I forgot Rex. And I was like, no, you purposely did not get Rex. It would have taken you 10 minutes. You live right across the freeway. Like, the fuck you mean?
And when she did try to get Rex, they were like, hang on, you're under arrest. I was like, yeah.
You're under a Rex.
Oh,
Oh no. It's Rex from Toy Story.
but Nico, was that kill with the babysitter your favorite?
Yeah, it was. I do wish, after Dan's comment, that she would have been skinned alive. I think that would have been cool, but it was already a pretty cool scene for me.
Mm-hmm. I would have to say my favorite scene was the one with the husband in the car and Freddy kind of bursting
his
into
dick.
Aria. I was going to
Tickles
say,
his dick with 5 knives.
Bro, he just gives a little tap.
The world's sharpest hand job ever.
you know,
Talk about grip earlier.
I was going to make a good point, but no, I'm not. Just,
He made 5 of them.
Oh, it was a good point.
okay. I see what we've done on this podcast now. If you've made it this far, I thank you for listening. And we're going to just move straight along into the what would you do. So this one's a little bit different because obviously it's a meta commentary on a movie. And I will ask you this. None of us are film guys. What role do you think we would play if they were making a Nightmare movie? What role do you think we would play, whether in the, you know, like on set or as a member of the cast? Dan, I'm banning you from sound because that's too obvious an answer.
Yeah.
But, you know, where do you think we are? And we'll start with Nico. Dan, what do you think Nico would be?
I think Nico would be, I feel like he'd be a doctor.
Be a doctor?
Yeah, he'd be one of the people at the hospital.
Okay,
the
okay.
main
That
doctor
makes-
looking over Dylan.
That makes total sense. Agreed. Now, where am I at? Who would you put me at? Fuck you guys. Where'd you put me?
I feel like you're the babysitter.
Oh my God.
I could see you being a babysitter, yeah.
You know, I would like box someone down if they like tried to sneak that medication
Bro,
onto the
She
kid.
went in, bro. She was the best character. She's like,
Yeah.
yo, the mom told me not to let him go to sleep, so fuck you. I'm going to punch you, and then I'm going to threaten to stab you with some unknown injection.
Yeah, she was like, I know what's in this needle. Do you know what's in this one? Like, oh shit, yo. Who wants what? So I agree. And lastly, Dan, Nico, where's Dan at with this?
I feel like Dan would be over some sort of like health and safety code type shit.
Oh, you feel so?
Yeah. Yeah, just
can
making
read
sure
the rules.
everything's yeah, making sure we're safe both legally and, you know, not in any kind of dangerous actual situations.
See, it's funny because I could also see him potentially as the guy from New Line Cinema, like the guy running everything. Because it's like, oh, you're doing well. You've got like clients and stuff. He's like, yeah, I am now, yeah. And she's like, have you had bad dreams? Cut scene. Next scene now. Like,
Yo,
all
speaking
right,
of
damn.
cutscene, real quick, why did I almost called her Nancy? Why did Heather not go immediately right back to Wes Craven?
That's what I would have done.
Like the fucking camera shows that, like y'all were saying, there's a shot of the script and it's like fade to black. If I were Heather, I would be like, no, hold up, we gotta work this one out right quick, champ. Like, I know it comes to you in your dreams, but like, you gotta give me something.
I don't know, man. I got nothing for you there. So I say we take it to the critic review. Where do you guys think this sits on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm gonna say middling, like a little above average, because I know meta stories can be really divisive. So I'm gonna say like a 64.
Meta stories can be really divisive.
Yeah. I'm going to say it went pretty well at 85.
Dan, you win. This is at
Good.
a 79% from critics on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience didn't like it quite as much at a 67. Where are we at?
I had fun. I'll give it an 85. Go off, Dan.
I actually didn't, as much as I shit on it this whole time, I thought it was fine. It was an okay movie. It just didn't live up to the expectations that I was hoping for. To see a slightly more modern Nightmare movie with Wes Craven directing it again, I had a lot of high hopes, and I was kind of disappointed. There wasn't as much innovation. It just kind of had so many callbacks to the previous works, which, and again, I don't mind it being meta, and sort of the core concept I think is fine. I just didn't really like the execution of it. But overall, it was fine. I would say a 65.
Dan, you know what's crazy to think about? This movie came out 10 years after the first. They fucking cranked those movies out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
That's-
cranked that dreamy boy.
Indeed. So I personally really, really, really like this movie. And I ain't gonna lie, it's because I fell in love with the meta nature of it, even down to the cheesy little, hey Nancy, hey Heather, thanks for being Nancy one last time. That's like in the movie, but also real life. And I think this movie isn't about Freddy. This is a movie about Nancy. And
Yeah.
I think this movie also functions as a commentary on the quote unquote final girl. And what does the final girl do after? Like, what does she do after? How does she put together her life? And I think in particular, first off, this might be the most feminist Nightmare movie ever, question mark. Because we get a reversal of the bathroom scene with the husband in the first little opening sections. And then more importantly, it takes one very important aspect of femininity, being a mother, because that's kind of like one of her biggest motivations is like she's going to defend her kid now. Like now she has a kid to protect from Freddy. So she does all this stuff. She has way more autonomy in this movie. And I just really, honest to goodness, just really, really, really liked it. Also, I'm fucking in love with how she looks in this movie. I'm sorry. No, not really sorry.
Yeah, same.
And because of all that, it's going to get a 90 from me. I just totally in love with this movie. But meta commentaries and analysis are always divisive. So I can definitely see why someone like Dan, who's just a hating ass soul, I can see why Dan doesn't like it. Because it does change quite a fucking lot. So you walk in thinking nightmare, and you walk out with a nightmare. So
Oh,
I could see it.
Amazing.
Now, are we going to recommend this movie?
I would.
I think I would.
I'm surprised.
I definitely would, but I can tell for certain there's no seal here, no golden seal.
No way.
All right. Well, let us know your thoughts, dear listener. We're on X and Instagram at DOTD Horror. We're also on Facebook. Just don't open that door. Plus, you can check out everything we've done on our website, which is dotdhorror.com. But till next time, sweet dreams, for real. Look out for one another. But as always, dear listener, don't open that door. Bye.